Cyber Threat Brief for May 9, 2026. Palo Alto Networks is patching CVE 2026-0300, a critical zero-day in PANOS being actively exploited for remote code execution with a Sunday deadline for federal agencies. The Dirty Frag Linux kernel exploit is gaining traction in the wild with public root exploit code available and no patches yet released. Poland documents 5 water treatment plant breaches where attackers gained ICS, industrial control systems, access and the ability to modify operational parameters, while Ivanti EPM customers face another zero-day patch deadline after CVE 2026-6973 was exploited by threat actors. Here's the full breakdown of today's top security stories. Daily Cybersecurity Brief. May 9, 2026. Next section, Critical Alerts. Palo Alto Networks PANOS Zero Day, CVE 2026-0300. Palo Alto Networks disclosed CVE 2026-0300, a critical buffer overflow in the PANOS User ID Authentication Portal, captive portal, that allows unauthenticated remote code execution with root privileges. The vulnerability scores 9.3 CVSS, the common vulnerability scoring system, and is being actively exploited in the wild. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, added it to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog with a May 9 remediation deadline. EPSS, the exploit prediction scoring system, scoring indicates 4.6% exploitation probability, 89th percentile. Action: apply patches immediately, review admin accounts and rotate credentials. If patching cannot be completed by deadline, disable the captive portal feature or implement compensating network controls to restrict access to the authentication portal. Sources: Sentinel-1. Ivanti EPM Zero Day exploited, CVE 2026-6973. CISA has given federal agencies until Sunday, May 10 to patch CVE 2026-6973, a high-severity vulnerability in Ivanti Endpoint Manager Mobile, EPM, that allows authenticated administrators to execute arbitrary code remotely. The flaw was exploited as a zero-day and affects EPM 12.8.0.0 and earlier. Over 800 EPM appliances remain exposed online according to Shadowserver. This is the third actively exploited EPM vulnerability in 2026, following and from January, and 2 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: upgrade to EPM 12.6.1.1 or review all accounts with admin rights and rotate those credentials immediately. Customers who rotated credentials following the January zero-day exploits face significantly reduced risk, and 2 additional IP addresses in the show notes. Sources: Bleeping Computer. Dirty Frag Linux privilege escalation under active exploitation. Microsoft reports active exploitation of Dirty Frag, a Linux local privilege escalation vulnerability. CVE 2026-43284. CVE 2026-43500, affecting kernel networking and memory fragment handling in ESP4, ESP6, and RxRPC components. The exploit enables escalation from unprivileged user to root with higher reliability than traditional Linux privilege escalation techniques. Public proof of concept code is available. Affected distributions include Ubuntu, RHEL, CentOS Stream, Alma Linux, Fedora, OpenSUSE, and OpenShift. Microsoft Defender detects limited in-the-wild activity, showing privilege escalation via SUE followed by reconnaissance and data access. No patches are currently available. Action: monitor for unusual privilege escalation activity and SUE usage patterns. Restrict access to vulnerable kernel modules if not required for production workloads. Implement enhanced logging around authentication and privilege changes. Review systems where ISEC or VPN functionality enables RxRPC and ESP components. Sources: Microsoft Security Blog. The Register. Berry AI Lite LLM SQL injection. CVE 2026-42208. CISA added CVE 2026-42208, a SQL injection vulnerability in Berry AI Lite LLM, to the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog with a May 11 remediation deadline. The vulnerability has extremely low EPSS scoring, 0.1%, 24th percentile, but CISA identified evidence of active exploitation. Lite LLM is an AI gateway and proxy tool used to manage API calls to multiple LLM providers. Action: federal agencies must patch by May 11. All Lite LLM users should update immediately and review access logs for suspicious database queries or unauthorized access attempts. Rotate API keys and service account credentials as a precaution. Source: CISA. Next section, Ransomware and Extortion. Karakurt extortion negotiator sentenced to 9 years. Federal prosecutors secured a nearly 9-year prison sentence for Denis Zolotarjovs, a Latvian national who served as a specialized cold case negotiator for the Karakurt extortion syndicate. Operating under the alias Sforza Cesarini, Zolotarjovs targeted victims who had previously stopped communicating with the group, using stolen personal data and sensitive health information, including children's medical records, to coerce ransom payments. The broader Karakurt operation has extorted an estimated $56 million from dozens of organizations. This marks the first federal prosecution of a Karakurt member. Source: Sentinel-1. North Korean IT worker laptop farm operators sentenced 2 American nationals, Matthew Newt and Eric Prince, were sentenced to 18 months in prison for operating laptop farms that facilitated North Korean cyber infiltration into nearly 70 U.S. companies. The defendants received company-issued laptops and deployed unauthorized remote desktop software, allowing North Korea-based IT workers to masquerade as legitimate domestic employees while stealing intellectual property, implanting malware, and siphoning funds to the sanctioned regime. The operation generated $1.2 million for North Korea. Action: review remote employee onboarding procedures and verify physical location of IT workers. Monitor for unusual remote desktop software installations on corporate devices. The FBI continues to warn about thousands of North Korean IT workers actively infiltrating U.S. companies. Sources: Sentinel-1 Security Week. Ransom House claims Trellix source code breach. Ransom House claimed responsibility for the May 1 breach of Trellix's source code repository, publishing screenshots of the cybersecurity company's appliance management system. Trellix confirmed unauthorized access to a portion of its source code repository on April 17, followed by data encryption. The company stated it found no evidence that source code release or distribution processes were affected, or that source code has been exploited. Trellix has over 53,000 customers in 185 countries. Bleeping Computer could not independently verify the authenticity of the leaked data. Source: Bleeping Computer. Shiny Hunters' second breach of Instructure. Canvas: The Shiny Hunters gang claimed a second breach of Instructure, the Canvas learning management system provider, hours after the company declared the incident contained. On May 7, Instructure took Canvas offline again after confirming the threat actor exploited an issue related to Free4Teacher accounts. The company temporarily shut down all Free4Teacher accounts and restored Canvas service. Students and teachers reported disruptions to final exams and coursework during the outage. Shiny Hunters extended their leak deadline to May 12 and offered affected schools the option to negotiate directly. Canvas is used by hundreds of colleges and universities, with hundreds of millions of user records potentially exposed. Action: educational institutions using Canvas should verify whether they use Free4Teacher accounts, monitor for unusual account activity, and review authentication logs for suspicious access patterns. Change administrative credentials as a precaution. Sources: Dark reading the register. Next section: IOCs and Detection. PCP Jack Cloudworm evicts Team PCP, harvests credentials. Sentinel Labs exposed PCP Jack, a credential theft framework and Cloudworm that actively hunts, evicts, and deletes artifacts associated with Team PCP, a threat group responsible for multiple supply chain intrusions. The multi-stage infection begins with Bootstrap SH, which downloads specialized Python modules from an attacker-controlled S3 bucket. The malware extracts cloud access keys, Kubernetes service account tokens, Docker secrets, enterprise application tokens, and cryptocurrency wallets. Unlike typical cloud threats, PCP Jack does not deploy cryptomining payloads. The framework exploits Next.js and WordPress vulnerabilities while scanning for exposed Docker, Redis, RayML, and MongoDB instances. Stolen data is encrypted and exfiltrated via Telegram. Action: enforce multi-factor authentication on service accounts. Restrict Kubernetes access scopes and use enterprise-wide credential vaults. Secure all exposed cloud management interfaces and monitor for unusual S3 bucket access or Telegram traffic from production systems. Source: Sentinel-1. Next section: business and infrastructure threats. Poland documents ICS, Industrial Control Systems, breaches at 5 water treatment plants. Poland's Internal Security Agency, ABWA, documented security breaches at water treatment stations in Jablona Laka, Shitno, Maldity, Tulkmiko, and Sierakawo during 2025. In some cases, attackers gained access to industrial control systems and obtained the ability to modify operational parameters of equipment, creating direct risk to operational continuity and public water supply. ABW identified 2 primary attack vectors: weak password policies and systems exposed directly to the internet. The agency attributed responsibility to Russian APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, groups APT-28 and APT-29, and Belarusian-linked UNC 1151. Attacks also targeted supply chains, wastewater treatment plants, and waste incineration facilities. Action: immediately remove ICS from direct internet exposure. Enforce strong password policies for OT systems and rotate credentials. Review supply chain access and authentication to ICS environments. Implement network segmentation between IT and OT environments. Source: Security Week. Zara breach exposes 197,000 customer records. Hackers breached databases hosted by a former Zara technology provider, exposing data belonging to 197,400 people, according to Have I Been PWNet. The compromised data includes email addresses, geographic locations, purchases, and support tickets. Inditex, Zara's parent company, stated that attackers did not access names, phone numbers, addresses, credentials, or payment information. Shiny Hunter's extortion gang claimed responsibility and leaked a 140 gigabytes archive allegedly stolen from BigQuery instances using compromised Anodot authentication tokens. The group told Bleeping Computer they had stolen data from dozens of companies using the same method. Action: organizations using Anodot or similar analytics platforms should review authentication token security and rotate credentials. Implement monitoring for unusual BigQuery access patterns and enforce least privilege access to cloud data warehouses. Source: Bleeping Computer. NVIDIA GeForce Now Armenian partner breach. NVIDIA confirmed a data breach affecting GeForce Now users in Armenia, caused by a compromise of infrastructure operated by regional partner GFN. The breach exposed full names, email addresses, usernames, dates of birth, and 2FA/top status for users who registered between March 20 and 26. No account passwords were compromised. NVIDIA stated its own network was not impacted. The Armenian operator GFN also manages GeForce Now operations in Azerbaijan, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Moldova, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan, but no impact on those countries has been confirmed. A threat actor using the Shiny Hunter's name claimed the breach and offered the database for $100,000, but this actor is believed to be an imposter. Source: Bleeping Computer. AI platform Braintrust breach exposes customer API keys. Braintrust, an AI evaluation and observability platform, urged customers to rotate API keys after hackers accessed an AWS account on May 4. The compromised internal AWS account likely provided attackers with access to org-level API keys that organizations use to access AI models from providers including OpenAI, Anthropic, and others. At least one customer was confirmed affected, with 3 others reporting suspicious spikes in AI provider usage. The company has not identified broader customer exposure, but notified all org admins with stored AI provider secrets as a precaution. Action: Braintrust customers should immediately access org-level settings, delete or revoke existing secrets, configure new secrets, and verify rotation by checking timestamps. All users of AI gateway, evaluation, and observability platforms should review API key storage practices and implement rotation schedules. Source: Security Week. Next section: Windows/Active Directory security. TCL Banker banking Trojan spreads via WhatsApp and Outlook. Elastic Security Labs flagged TCL Banker, a Brazilian banking Trojan targeting 59 banking, fintech, and cryptocurrency platforms. The malware is a major update of the Maverick family and leverages DLL, Dynamic Link Library, sideloading against a signed Logitech program, Logi AI Prompt Builder, to deploy a full-featured banking Trojan and worm component. The loader includes comprehensive anti-analysis capabilities that detect sandboxes, debuggers, disassemblers, instrumentation tools, and antivirus software. It removes user mode hooks, disables event tracing for Windows telemetry, and only executes if the user's default language is Brazilian Portuguese. The banking Trojan monitors browser URLs for financial institutions and establishes WebSocket connections to enable remote control, screen capture, keylogging, and fake overlay attacks. The worm module propagates via WhatsApp Web and Microsoft Outlook. Action: Monitor for unusual Logitech application installations, Logi Prompt Builder, exe, and suspicious DLL files, Screen Retriever Plugin, DLL. Block execution of unknown DLLs side-loaded with signed applications. Review ETW telemetry configurations for unauthorized modifications. Source: The Hacker News. Next section: General Security News. Quasar Linux RAT targets developer credentials for supply chain attacks. Trend Micro uncovered Quasar Linux RAT, QLNX, a previously undocumented Linux implant targeting developers to steal credentials from NPMRC, PyPerk, git credentials, oz/credentials, cube/config, docker/config, JSON, Vault token, Terraform credentials, GitHub CLI tokens, and env files. The malware executes filelessly from memory, masquerades as kernel threads, Quirker, ksoftirkt, detects containerized environments, wipes system logs, and establishes persistence using systemd, crontab, and bashrc injection. It supports 58 distinct commands including shell execution, file management, process injection, screenshots, keylogging, SOX proxies, TCP tunnels, and beacon object file execution. The malware includes a PAM inline hook backdoor that intercepts plaintext credentials and a two-tiered rootkit architecture using LD preload and eBPF to hide artifacts. Action: monitor for unusual kernel thread names and unexpected processes executing from memory. Review PAM configurations for unauthorized modifications. Scan for LD preload environment variable manipulation and unexpected eBPF programs. Implement file integrity monitoring on developer credential files. Source: The Hacker News. Pamdora Linux backdoor advertised for $900 flare. EO detailed Pamdora, a new Linux backdoor advertised on the Rehub Russian cybercrime forum by threat actor Darkworm for $1,600, reduced to $900 as of April 9. The PAM-based post-exploitation toolkit enables persistent SSH access via a magic password and specific TCP port combination, while harvesting credentials from all legitimate users who authenticate through the compromised system. The backdoor incorporates anti-forensic capabilities to tamper with authentication logs and erase traces of malicious activity. There is no evidence of real-world deployment yet, but the reduced price suggests either lack of buyer interest or intent to accelerate sales. Action: audit PAM module configurations for unauthorized modifications. Monitor authentication logs for unusual SSH access patterns and unexplained successful logins. Implement file integrity monitoring on PAM configuration directories, /etc//pam. Sources: The Hacker News Security Week. SOC alert backlogs hiding real threats analysis of 25 million security alerts across live enterprise environments found that nearly 1% of confirmed incidents originated from alerts initially classified as low severity or informational. On endpoints specifically, that figure climbed to nearly 2%. At enterprise scale, generating 450,000 alerts per year, this translates to approximately 54 real threats annually, one per week, that never get investigated under traditional SOC or MDR triage models. Of 82,000 alerts that underwent live forensic memory scans, 2,600 had active infections. Of those confirmed compromised endpoints, 51% had already been marked as mitigated by source EDR vendors. Malware families found running in memory included Mimikatz, Cobalt Strike, Meterpreter, and Strela Stealer. Action: review SOC triage processes and alert investigation coverage rates. Consider implementing automated investigation for low-severity alerts rather than dismissing them. Deploy memory-level forensic analysis to validate EDR remediation claims before closing incident tickets. Sources: The Hacker News Bleeping Computer. Fake Android call history apps steal $7.3 M in subscriptions. Asset discovered 28 fraudulent apps on Google Play Store that claim to provide access to call histories, SMS records, and WhatsApp call logs for any phone number. The apps collectively racked up over 7.3 million downloads before removal, with one app alone accounting for over 3 million downloads. The scam, codenamed Call Phantom, primarily targeted users in India and the Asia-Pacific region. Victims were prompted to pay for access, but received only randomly generated fake data embedded in the app source code. At least one app was published under the developer name Indian Gov. To build false trust. Action: review mobile device management policies to prevent installation of apps from unknown publishers. Educate users about App Store scams and verification of developer credentials before installing apps requesting payment for data access. Source: The Hacker News. Next section: patch priority. Palo Alto PanOS CVE 2026-0300. CVSS 9.3 actively exploited 0-day CISAKEV known exploited vulnerabilities catalog deadline May 9. Iventi App CVE 2026-6973. High severity actively exploited 0-day CISAKEV deadline May 10. cPanel/WHM. 3 vulnerabilities including CVE 2026-29202 and CVE 2026-29203. CVSS 8.8, allowing code execution and privilege escalation. Linux kernel, Dirty Frag CVE 2026-43284, CVE 2026-43500, public exploit available, active exploitation, no patches yet released. Berry AI Lite LLM, CVE 2026-42208. SQL injection actively exploited, CIS a KEV deadline May 11. Next section, vulnerability disclosures. cPanel and WHM patch 3 vulnerabilities. cPanel released updates addressing 3 vulnerabilities in cPanel and Web Host Manager that could lead to privilege escalation, code execution, and denial of service. CVE 2026-29201, CVSS 4.3 is an insufficient input validation, allowing arbitrary file read. CVSS 8.8 allows arbitrary Perl code execution via the Create User API. CVSS 8.8 is an unsafe symlink handling vulnerability, allowing chmod modification of arbitrary files. Patches are available in versions 11.136.0.9 and higher across multiple branches. While no evidence of in-the-wild exploitation exists, the disclosure comes days after was weaponized as a 0-day to deliver Mirai botnets and Sari ransomware, and 3 additional CVEs. See show notes for the full list. Action: update to latest cPanel/WHM versions immediately. Review user permissions and audit recent file system modifications. Monitor for unusual API calls to create user or load feature file functions. Source: The Hacker News. Next section, trends and context. 3 significant patterns emerge from today's threat landscape. First, the exploitation timeline continues to compress. Palo Alto's CVE 2026-0300 and Iventi's CVE 2026-6973 both reached active exploitation as 0 days, with federal remediation deadlines measured in days rather than weeks. Second, Linux systems face escalating post-compromise risk from dirty frag privilege escalation, public exploit, no patches, QLNX developer credential theft, and Pandora PAM backdoors, all targeting the supply chain through developer access. Third, cloud and SaaS security incidents, Zara via Anodot tokens, Braintrust AI keys, Instructure Canvas free for teacher accounts, demonstrate that third-party provider compromises create cascading breach risk across customer bases. Organizations relying on secure by default cloud services need credential rotation procedures and supply chain security reviews. That concludes today's cyber threat brief. From Carolina Clear Tech. Stay patched, stay vigilant.